Oh man, I wish it was easier to get Baja Blast in the UK. No sponsorship. Anyway, on to business. So the plan for today is to make a zero clearance insert for the mitre saw. This is the big Bosch GCM 12 GDL glide arm. It's the 305mm saw or 12-inch saw. There are plenty of similar videos on YouTube. So what makes this one different? Well, potentially two things. I don't have a planer or thicknesser or a drum sander, so how am I going to get the thickness of the insert perfectly flush with the saw bed? I'll tell you shortly. And I'm also going to make a zero clearance fence for the back of the saw, which isn't particularly difficult. So maybe it's more like 1.5 things really that make this video different. Why am I bothering? So I find myself wanting to cut small pieces quite often, surprisingly often. And I do have this bench hook that I made, which is brilliant if I'm just doing 1 or 2 cuts. If I'm not needing to do stop blocks or lots of repeat cuts or lots of angle cuts, it's great, you know, as long as I'm not doing anything fancy. And for someone who's mainly a power tool woodworker, I do actually enjoy using it quite a lot. I find it quite, you know, nice to be doing something with hand tools as well. But it'd still be handy to have the capability to do small pieces on the mitre saw, because there's quite a big gap there. The lower part of the fence, which is fixed, that has to be fixed for bevel cuts, but it's quite a large gap at the bottom. And like many people, I rarely tilt the saw for bevel cuts, so I'm fine to, you know, remove all the zero clearance stuff if I'm doing bevel cuts in future. Although I think I do have one trick that will help with that. I did consider making a bed, like a sort of a bed with a fixed fence at the back that I could just plonk on there and just use that for when I wanted to make cuts in small pieces. But I like the setup with the tops of these units being flush with the bed of the saw, so I wouldn't want it to be there permanently, and it's quite a big thing to store when it's not in use. And if I do it this way, I get the benefit of the zero clearance there stuff being there for every single cut, not just for the cuts where I'm doing small pieces. I should also mention that these plastic pieces, these inserts, are in 2 parts and they do move. I think Bosch envisaged people would move them in for most of the time and then move them back out for bevel cuts, but I don't want to do that because I don't really want to risk cutting into those plastic bits. I'd rather keep them intact. How am I going to get the thickness right without a planer, thicknesser or drum sander? So I confess to a little bit of luck here in that the thickness of these plastic bits is about 9mm. So I dug out a scrap of supposedly 9mm ply, but as you can see here, it's actually more like 8.5 mils. If it had been too thick, I would have maybe just sanded the underside of it. But with it being slightly too thin, I think I can probably use layers of masking tape on the bottom of it to shim it up to the right level. I admit that is a little bit of a cheat, simply getting lucky with the fact it was 9 mil. So let me quickly show you one idea I did have if the thickness had been an odd number. I was thinking I could use the plastic inserts as a spacer on the table saw between the fence and the blade, then find a piece of hardwood or even ply, run it through on its edge to kind of resaw it to the right thickness that way, or perhaps use some playing cards to make it even slightly thicker and then sand it back to the right thickness once it was kind of installed. I will say right off the bat that the idea of making this cut was pretty scary. It's not a simple cut to make on a table saw, and I wouldn't recommend anybody do it if they've got another way, even if you use like a gripper or one of those push blocks. It's quite tricky to make that cut and stay safe, so please realise this was just an idea at the back of my head. It would need a lot more care and thought if you wanted to take it forward somehow. John Peters at Longview Woodworking has done something similar to this, so I'll link to his video in the description as well. Right, let's remove the existing inserts. Because they're in 2 parts, we've got to find a way of keeping them together. So I'm going to steal an idea from Manscaped Woodworking, who I'll also link to in the description. Basically just using tape prior to unscrewing it, and then it should be good enough to lift off as one piece to trace around and get the whole positions right. Incidentally, these little snap-off knives that Peter Millard recommended a while ago are amazing for stuff like this. I'll also just say, as I'm going to the trouble of doing this, I've decided to make 2 so that I have a spare when I inevitably cut into the first one too much on a bevel or something like that. And while you've got the insert out, this is a great time to clean all the crap out from the inside. If it helps anyone, these bolts that hold on the plastic inserts are M5 by 0.8mm thread, which I think is the standard M5 thread. And then they are 15 mils overall length, 5 mils for the cap, they're cap head bolts, and 10 mils for the thread. Just in case that's helpful. Here's something to bear in mind. I could do with cutting this piece to length, about there, but I currently don't really have a working mitre saw because I've taken the insert out. So if you're cutting some pieces to length, maybe do that before you take out the inserts to trace around. That's perhaps a workflow step for you. Now, this thing obviously flexes in the middle and it's not super rigid, but provided you're careful, you can trap it between the fence and the blade to get the spacing right. You just have to not squeeze it very much, just have to be very careful. Now, for marking the positions of the screw holes, we have to remember that because these have got slots in, because these are the plastic insert designed to move in and out, we're going to have to mark our holes on the inside edges of those slots, not the outside edges, so the kind of more middle positions. And that's important because otherwise you're going to end up with the holes in the wrong places. The thread of the bolts is 5 mils, so I'm going to use a 5.5mm bit to give a tiny bit of wiggle room. This cap is about 8.5 mils in diameter, so ideally I'd use a 10mm Forstner bit. I don't have a 10mm Forstner bit, so I'm going to use a 10mm normal bit. But the cap is 5 mils thick, so considering the ply is only 8.5 mils thick, we haven't got a huge amount of meat to work with here, so have to be pretty careful. So I'm going to use the drill press and just go very gently. Okie doke, so this is a test fit with the screws in. It's pretty good, fits well. There is, as I say, it is a little low. If you look, you can see a gap underneath there. And as I say, I think I can fill that gap with masking tape. So I'm going to get some layers of masking tape on the bottom and shim it. Just on my particular mitre saw, interestingly, it's only these 5 sort of milled dots on each side that actually make contact with the plate. The blue bits you can see here are underneath, they don't make contact. So those are the only bits you actually need to have tape on. But obviously I'm just going to run a strip of tape down each side. You want to leave the middle clear, obviously, because you want sawdust to be able to get in there. That's where it needs to go. I think I'm going to try 3 strips of tape initially, and then we'll see how we go from there. Okay, this is with 6 layers of tape. There is still a tiny, tiny gap. I reckon maybe 2 more layers will probably do it. Okay, so I think that's 8 layers of tape in total. This spare one I've made, which I'm going to save for later, I'm not going to bother putting tape on that now, but I am just going to write on it 8 layers of tape, so that I know how many layers of tape I need at the point I come to use that one. Also just thought, in addition to writing 8 layers of tape on there, so I remember I've also written that I used a 5.5mm bit and the set it came from just for the holes, so that when I'm drilling out the holes in the tape, when I add it in future, I can use the same one. And as you get closer to the fit, as the tolerances get tighter, it gets harder and harder to slide them under this back part of the fence that sticks out. So I've marked which is the top or the wall end for me, because I think that, as I say, when these tolerances get tighter, it does actually matter probably which end. You start getting to the bits where you need to slide it over and it's actually quite hard. And I don't want to peel the tape back as I do it. Okay, that's feeling pretty good. Okay, with 8 layers of tape, that is as flush as I think I can get it, as flush as I need it to be. So yeah, I'm happy with that. And now for the satisfying bit, which is the first cut. Oh yeah, that's pretty satisfying. There is a little bit of annoying burning, which I imagine I'll focus in on every time I look at it and will slightly annoy me, but apart from that, that's pretty good. One thing I am going to do is keep the tape on this. I'm not going to reinstate it. I'm going to keep the plastic insert, but keep it like that just in case I ever want to make more of these in future. This is all ready to go to trace around, and that can just live behind there or something, I don't know, somewhere it's out of the way and I'll find it easily. So yeah, I've got 2, easily you can make more now. Right, onto the fence I think. It's a new day, new drink, love a bit of 1901. So today I'm going to make the fence that goes along the back. You can see I've written on this here just to remind me not to use for bevel cuts. Oh, and I've hung these up on the inside there just rather than having them sit under there because they'll get a bit less dusty. Yeah, so the fence could be as simple as just taking a bit of wood and plonking it along there like that. And that would be pretty simple. The only thing I definitely need to do is cut out for this dust shroud here, because you can see it is obstructed by that wood at that height. And I do want to use these top holes. These fences have holes at the bottom you could attach to, but also these holes at the top. I want to use the holes at the top so that I can slide the fence out of the way if I'm doing mitres. Yeah, I could just literally attach a strip of wood like that, cut it in the middle and pretty much be done with it, but I want to make it look a little bit nicer than that. So yeah, let's get this fence done. I'm going to use the same 9mm ply that I used for the zero clearance, and the reason is I could use 18mm or even 12 I suppose. I don't want to bring the workpieces out too far this way because I've got these match fit grooves and measurement rulers that I've put in the worktops. And I just don't want to bring stuff too far over here because the stop blocks sit quite nicely with where the workpieces typically are at the moment. So I'm just going to use 9mm. But yeah, probably 18mm would be a slightly better choice, but 9mm will do fine, I think. Just going to mark up a centre line on the back of this board. Annoyingly, like with 9mm, quite often that's not thick enough for a lot of squares to kind of sit flush on the wood, but I've got this crappy old combination square and that does thankfully sit there. So let's find the centre. I have to say, I bought this sander with one specific project in mind, which was my templates for the draw pulls that I did a little video about a while ago. And I wasn't sure how much I'd use it, and I'm just using it all the time, like on every project. It's been such a good buy. And the thing is, I use the belt sander most, and the belt sander is something I had before. I had like an Aldi Ferex one, and I just never used it. It was rubbish. And this, just having this big flat bed, which is, I'm not going to say exactly 90 degrees, but you know, nearly 90 degrees, it's just amazing. Like, I use it all the time now. So yeah, it's been a great buy. Okay, here's a reason why it probably would be better to go for 18mm than 9mm. So I've got a 4x20 screw here with 3 washers on, and when I poke that through, that's just about right. However, you can see there really isn't very much meat of the wood for the screw to go into, so it's not a terrific hold, and I really wouldn't want to counterbore a bolt head into there to have a bolt going through to try and get better purchase, to be honest with you. So I think this will do the job, but yeah, probably if you can get away with 18mm, if you don't have to worry about these measuring strips and match fit grooves that you've already got, then 18mm would be a lot better for this, to be honest with you. So just like I'm doing, I've got these 1mm packing spacers, and I'm just popping those underneath there just to lift it up a tiny bit. I did run a block plane along just for like a groove for sawdust, but also just going to lift it up just to make it easier when I'm sliding them out the way and back again, and also for sawdust. You could use playing cards, of course, for that. Because there isn't that much meat on the screws, I've decided to do a little bit of double-sided tape along there and there, except I'm not doing double-sided tape because quite often with real double-sided tape I find it's quite hard to get off, and with plywood it can like rip off the top layer. Not that I really care about this fence, but you know, so I'm just using the 2 layers of masking tape, and then I'm going to do CA glue and activator on there and stick it on. So yeah. That's probably another good reason to use plywood instead of MDF, because MDF is much easier for the screw to start spinning. Okay, that's it fixed on, and I only managed to get a small amount of super glue on my fingers, so that's always a bonus. So let's do that satisfying first cut down the middle. Now, just to show you, if I were to move this round to 45 degrees, oops, 45, you can see from the laser here, it's going to cut through that side bit of the fence, and obviously same if I was to mitre it on the other side. So what I can do is just reach back here, unscrew that, slide out the way, and then I can do mitre cuts, same on this side, and then I can do mitre cuts without having to worry about it. Obviously I could slide it back in to get sort of reasonably close to zero clearance if I wanted, make sure the laser's not intruding on that. Bevel cuts, similarly I can slide these out the way, but if I'm doing a bevel cut I do have to change that, or cut into it and then at some point use the new one or whatever. But anyway, so yeah, I think that's a pretty flexible system. So there we go, I made a zero clearance insert and a fence for the big Bosch glide arm. The fence will move out the way for mitres and bevels and come back to the same place. The zero clearance insert will work for mitres but not for bevels, but I made an extra one. I wrote on the back so that I wouldn't forget all the details. I also kept the tape on this thing so that I can make spares. To be honest, if I'd had more 9mm ply available, I probably would have made like 3 or maybe even 4, just because it's easy and efficient to make multiples whilst you're doing this kind of thing. The dust extraction still works, comes through. I won't say that the dust extraction is amazing on this saw, it isn't, but I'd rather have it working than not working, because without it working it's really bad. So yeah, I didn't have a planer or a thicknesser, didn't have a drum sander, so hopefully this might be helpful to someone out there. But thanks for watching, and cheers. Oh man, I do love that stuff.